Got it.
Okay, Erev Tov. So the topic that we chose now, and it will take us more than one session, is the topic of the question of equality, where on the one hand, the modern value of all people are equal. I would even right at the start say, not everybody's equal. People are different, but people should have equal rights, equal opportunities, and so on. And on the one hand, we find in the Torah a very powerful sensitivity towards people who are the weaker elements in society, who might be used, who might be treated in an unfair way by the weak in society, might sometimes be. One second. Here we go. Okay. The weaker elements in society might sometimes be taken advantage of by stronger elements in society. And the Torah is very strong at making sure that that doesn't happen. But at the same time, the Torah differentiates between different people in a way that in the modern world is not popular, maybe not acceptable. And so we have this question to deal with. But before we get straight into the question, I'd like to share some sources with you. I'm sorry that I haven't translated them into English, but I will explain them and we can study them as we go along. And there we are. You see the screen sharing?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. So the first point I'd like to make here is several sources discussing in different ways a kind of attitude that you might think that Hashem created the world and everything is in place, but actually Hashem created the world in a way that is asking us, offering us, demanding from us to participate in making the world what it should be. Hashem did not create a world that is all in place. Everything is set. Everything is perfect. We have a role. We have a mission in making the world the way it should be. One such source is this Midrash source number 1 here, that says the pasuk in Bereshit says, in the psukim about Shabbat, right at the beginning of the Torah, that end with the words Asher bara Elohim, the world to do. And I would think that the Torah would say Hashem created the world and it's done. So why does it end with the word la'asot? So the Midrash says, Shehiniach koach bahem la'asot. Hashem world in a way that it still has to be done, and we are given the koach, we are given the power to do, to make things in the world be the way they're supposed to. So if there isn't everything in place in the world, if not everyone has equal rights and so on, so maybe there's something here that is up to us to make it happen in the world. So that's source number 1, okay? Can I get a thumbs up from someone just to make sure you hearing me?
Absolutely, thumbs up.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I can continue. Source number 2 is the Zohar, that also uses the same word, that it says, Asher bara Elohim la'asot. And the Zohar says in Aramaic, Delo ishtelimu ila vetata, that the heaven and earth are not shalem, are not complete. There's something that we have to do. Another pasuk in Bereshit says that Hashem created man in his image, in Hebrew, not a physical image of Hashem, but what is godly about human beings? So one possibility of explaining what is godly about human beings is to say that just like Hashem creates things, we are given the power to create things. To be like Hashem is to make the creation the way it should be. And there's a famous midrash here in source number 3 that brings, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's in Hebrew, but just to give a short summary of what it's saying in English, there is some Roman in Hebrew called Tonus Rufus. I think in Roman he's called Tinius Rufus, if I have that correct in my historical knowledge. And he says to Rabbi Akiva, he's kind of trying to mock Rabbi Akiva, and he says, what's nicer, what Hashem does or what human beings do? And he's expecting Rabbi Akiva to say, you know, what Hashem does, and then he'll challenge him. And Rabbi Akiva says, what human beings do is nicer than what Hashem does. For example, Hashem creates wheat and barley, he creates grains, and human beings make bread out of the grain. What are you going to do with grain? You know, you can't eat it, or you can, but it's not the best. It's much better after you bake it. So what human beings do is better than what Hashem does. And what Tunius Rufus or Tonus Rufus was trying to challenge Rabbi Akiva was about circumcision. He's, you know, kind of saying if Hashem wanted people to be circumcised, then he would have created them circumcised. So why do you go against what God created and change the world and change the human beings that he created? So Rabbi Akiva is saying, no. You see, Hashem created the world in a way that is up to us to complete. For instance, he gives him another example, and he says when a baby is born, you know, you can't leave him the way he is. He's connected to the umbilical cord. Did I pronounce that correctly? He's connected to the umbilical cord, and then you can't leave him that way. You have to cut him off from that source of sustenance for the baby and enable him to start living as a human being in the world. So Hashem did a lot, but we have to complete it. So it's not only physical. We take grains and make food out of it. We take a baby and you know, disconnect him from the umbilical cord and enable him to start living as a human being in this world. Or we take a baby and circumcise him. All these are examples that are saying that truly Hashem did not create the world complete. He created the world in ways that are greater than what we can do, but it's there for us to complete and to continue the creation of the world. Source number 4, I'm going to go through 6 sources, and then I will stop and I would like to hear comments. Source number 4, Rav Soloveitchik is saying, what's the idea of the story of Bereshit? Why does the Torah go at length and describe this whole detailed story of Bereshit? And Rav Soloveitchik says that it's trying to tell us that Hashem started the world, but there's still a lot to be done. As we see right at the beginning of Bereshit, the world is not perfect. Human beings are not perfect. So Hashem created the world, and he's giving us the message that we have to help the world along, that we have to help Hashem make the world the way it's supposed to be. Again, the same idea. Source number 5 is a little different. Source number 5 is the Rambam Maimonides in the compilation of Jewish law, which is known as Hayad HaChazakah or Mishneh Torah, that the Rambam wrote. There is a whole section, as we see here in the headline in number 5, of Hilchot Avadim, the halachot of slaves. And there are 2 kinds of slaves. Right now we're talking about non-Jewish slaves who are property. In the halakha recognized this, that a person can be a slave and is actually property. He is inherited, the son inherits this slave, and the Rambam brings down all of the details of the laws of slavery. And then at the end of the laws of slavery, says the Rambam, you're allowed to enslave a non-Jewish slave. You're even allowed to make him work in very difficult ways that we're not allowed to have a Jew work for us in that way. But in spite of the fact that legally that's permissible, it's not right to do it, says the Rambam. He calls it, if you see the words in Hebrew right here, 1 second, Midat Chasidut v'darchei Chochma. Rambam says it's not good qualities, it's not a good trait, and it's not wise for a person to make a slave work in an unjust way. the proper traits and the ways of wisdom are that a person should be just and should not put his weight too strongly on his slave, and he should make sure that he has what to eat and what to drink and so on. And he brings psukim from Job, where Job says about his own traits that we were both, I'll show you the pasuk. He brings the pasuk in Job, where Job says, I did not make fun or make little of my slaves. I did not treat them in a way that wasn't just. And then he says at the end, we were both created in the womb, meaning we're both human beings. I'm a human being and my slave is a human being. So it's fascinating because the Rambam is saying we do have laws of slavery, and the Rambam does not abolish the laws of slavery. But he says this is not the world is not where it should be. There's a better place to be where we will treat people equally. And it's fascinating that on the one hand, the Rambam is saying that there are laws of slavery, and in his time, we're talking about the 12th century, about 800 years ago. In his time, says the Rambam, it was legitimate to have slaves, but we know that there's a higher place, there's a more moral place that we will reach in the future. It's hard for us today in the 21st century. It's hard for us to fathom that there can be slavery in the world, that there can be rules and laws of slavery. But that's us, another 800-900 years after the Rambam. But even then, the Rambam was saying, right now we recognize there are laws of slavery, but there's a higher level. There's still where to aspire to. So even Jewish law is not the end. Jewish law is moving the world forward, but it's not enough. It's not necessarily, you can't just say, I keep halakha, I keep Jewish law, therefore I'm a good person. You also have to think what more needs to be done in the world to still make the world a better place. So that's source number 5. And the last source in this sequence, and then I'd like to open up for comments, is source number 6. And here, the Gemara in Bava Batra, in Tractate Bava Batra, says the following. Again, we have our dear friend Turnus Rufus. Here he is, Turnus Rufus. And he's arguing again with Rabbi Akiva. Right here, Rabbi Akiva. And this time he says, does God want people to be rich or poor? If he wants them to be rich, why does he make them poor? Meaning, when you give charity, you're going against God. God made this person poor. And here you are helping him and giving him money. If God wanted him to have money, God would have given him money. If God didn't give him money, don't give him money. You're going against God when you give him money. Says Turnus Rufus, I'll give you a parable. Says it's like a king who gets angry at one of his slaves, one of his citizens, and he locks him up in prison, and he gives everyone a commandment not to bring him food and water. And then one of the other citizens goes and brings this person who's in prison, brings him food and water. So when the king hears about this, he's going to be very angry with this other person who brought the prisoner food and water. So this is what Hashem did. Hashem made him poor. He's the king. And so he said, I want him to be poor. And you're bringing him food and water and giving him charity and going against what the king did. So the king is going to be very angry with you. So Rabbi Akiva answers him with a different parable. And he says to him, I'll give you a different parable with one very small and very big change. And he says the change is in this word right here. Instead of avdo in Hebrew, it's bno. Instead of his slave, it's his son. The king is angry at his son. And he says to lock his son up in prison and not to bring him food and water. And someone goes and brings the king's son food and water. And when the king hears about this, is he going to say to that person, that's terrible, you went against the king's will, you saved my son's life, that's terrible? Or is he going to say, wow, I was angry, I overreacted, thank you for bringing my son food and water? So then this is how Rabbi Akiva answers Turnus Rufus, and he says to him, again, Hashem did not create the world in a way that is all set and we just have to be passive and let Hashem run the world. Hashem created the world in a way that we have to be partners. We have to be like his children, helping what he's doing by being active, proactive, and making the world a better place. And this source, I think, is fascinating because it's saying that sometimes the king says something and we have to listen carefully and hear what does the king desire beyond what he said. He said, don't bring my son food and water. And we have to hear that the king was saying, don't bring my son food and water, but really, I'm hoping somebody will go behind my back and when I'm not looking and bring him food and water. So this is very challenging because where is this in the Torah? Is there a place in the Torah that Hashem is saying about something, this is the way it is, but I'm really expecting Am Yisrael to go ahead and make something different in the world. So I would like to reject two extremes. One extreme I would like to reject is to say that there is no legitimacy to even raise this question. If the Torah says something, if this is the halacha, we just have to adhere to it. There's no room for raising the possibility that maybe there can be a new psika. How do you say it? A new
Judgment.
Judgment of halacha by rabbis who are authorized to do it. There is room for raising questions and raising issues and trying to find sources and build a certain legal halachic claim that maybe we should make a new judgment of halacha on a certain issue. The other extreme that I would reject is to say that whatever the modern world says we have to do, we just have to bend over and do what the world says. Or if something is popular today, we have to follow that. We don't have to follow that. But we also don't have to say that there's no room to consider that maybe we can make a new rule, a new judgment, a new ruling of halacha. And so there are ways and there are tools in which to do it. You can't just say, I want to do this because this is the way I feel. But maybe there is room, and let's try to look for an example and ask ourselves, is there room for a new judgment of halacha in certain areas that have to do with equality and equal opportunities for different people? Let's look at these questions through tools. So I'd like to stop right now and open comments until now. And please don't wait for my approval. Just go ahead and unmute yourselves and share with us what you want to say.
You discussed before, Rabbi Tzvi, you've discussed before several times, I believe, the idea that the work is unfinished, that the world has not been presented as a finished job, and it's up to human beings to, as I think you've said many times, perfect the world or advance the world. This is a common theme, yeah. Otherwise, there'd be nothing for us to do. What would we be doing?
Right.
There's in any discussion of the sort, I like to bring in one of my heroes who said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal. And
They
they're
are endowed
endowed
by
by
their
the
Creator with certain inalienable rights.
right.
And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, etc. And it fits in so well with what you say, you know, that governments, the right of governments to exist is to improve the world. That was one thing. And then the other thing, somebody was bringing up Nadav and Avihu in between Mincha and Ma'ariv today, and he was sort of indicating that their sin was strongly related with personality. That, in other words, if you do something because you want to enhance your prestige, that's one thing. Whereas if you do something where you really want to improve the world, that's another thing. And I think that's also relates to what you said.
Missed something. What are you speaking? Are you talking about a specific sin or a certain specific story in the Torah?
Yeah, the one about offering the bad fire, or offering an unauthorized.
Oh, you're talking
fire.
about Parshat Shavua.
Yeah, Parshat Shavua.
You're talking about the Parshat Shavua, Parshat Shmini.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that like if people do something in order to enhance themselves and to enhance their power or the prestige or something like that, then that's the serious affront. But if you try to do something to really improve the world, it could be justified.
Okay. Thank you. Ilana, what was the quote that you said before?
It was Eliezer's quote. I just was continuing with what he started with.
Yeah, she knows the Declaration of Independence.
We were taught it in school. I mean, you had to know this.
Can you repeat the wording, please?
Eliezer, you started and I'll finish it.
Okay, I actually have the whole thing written out here.
No, I learned it by heart at one point.
I'm cheating, but it's the second paragraph that well, actually, the first paragraph is also strong, but we hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's just a piece, but we had to memorize that in school.
And then it goes on to say that the government has this obligation that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And then he goes on to say that England didn't do it.
Thank you.
But doesn't it, isn't it usually interpreted as the right to equal opportunity rather than actually being created equal?
Yes, endowed with certain enabling rights among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have the right to pursue happiness.
Yeah, but the first statement was created equal. I mean, we don't really think that's exactly true, do we?
In terms of equal opportunity?
In terms of equal opportunity, yes. In terms of actually being created equal, everybody's a little different.
Well, what are you thinking of, Mark?
Oh, well, just simply this. Look, before I had any children, I used to think that, kids were entirely a product of their environment. They're born, they're mush, and they develop their personalities entirely as dictated or controlled or influenced by their environment. It didn't take long after each of my children were born to understand that was a baloney, that they really are, individuals really from the get-go. Of course, they're influenced by their environment. So I would hold that they are not created equal.
I think he means equal in the face of the law.
Okay.
I don't think he means that they're equally intelligent or anything like that.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Somehow the framers of the Declaration of Independence didn't regard Black people as human beings, it seems.
There you go.
Right. So it took them another century, it took them another 100 years from the Declaration of Independence to accept the equality or the basic freedom of Black people, and then it took maybe another century to reach equality, and maybe it's still not there totally today.
And
By
women,
the way, is there a connection between the American Declaration of Independence and the UN's Declaration of Human Rights?
Oh, sure.
No, no idea.
I thought one of you said for sure and the other said no.
Not a formal connection, but I wonder if, if you put the two one next to the other, if you'll find, parallels. Interesting. So the point is, and this is exactly, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I have my doubts. I have my doubts. I don't know about the UN document, but I have my doubts that they're parallel.
Okay, we'll have to check that out.
Let's also amplify what Victor said, because you said the Black people are not regarded as human beings in the Constitution. Maybe women were not regarded as human beings either. They didn't have the vote.
Yeah, sure. And that will bring us to questions about the, between these modern values and Torah. And we'll get to that. But first, I would like to go through a different example first. So I'm going to go back to sharing the screen and say the following. Here in source number 7 is a pasuk in the Torah. There's a difference between, as you said, people are not equal, and they should have the equal opportunity to pursue happiness and to have aspirations in life. And there are differences between people, and a person who's not capable of some kind of a certain body of knowledge or expertise in a certain field, then he can't do that role. Talking about medicine, you can't say all people are equal. They can all operate equally. Let people stand in line. Whoever wants to do the operations can do the operations. That's silly. People have to study. They have to work hard. They have to be able. They have to be capable. In certain roles that people perform in society, they can only do them if they have the ability to do them. But then there are issues where people are different, and the difference is not relevant to a certain role. And yet we see in the Torah that not everything is open to everyone. And that's what I'd like to discuss as a challenge for us. How do we deal with this? And the example I'm bringing here in source number 7 is the pasuk in the Torah that says that the sons of Aaron, meaning the Kohanim, any one of them who has a who has a physical ailment, or maybe you choose a different word, is not able, he's not kosher to be one of the people who works, who performs the work that is done in the mikdash. That's what the pasuk is saying. Now, if you're saying he doesn't have hands, so he can't pick up the sacrifices and put them where they need to be put and things like that, maybe his what's the word? What's a good word for mum? Disability. Maybe his disability is relevant to not being able to perform a certain role. But if you look in the halakha, in the list of ailments or disfigurations or disabilities, some of them are, he looks different, but he can perform the role. So why does the Torah say, after stressing so much in so many different ways, that we should treat everyone equally and not allow weaker people in society to be taken advantage of by stronger people in society? Why here is it relevant that a person has a certain disfiguration or disability? Why is that relevant, and why does that make him not fit to be performing certain roles in Beit HaMikdash, in the temple? So before I even start trying to answer this question, I would like to say that first of all, it's a serious question. It's a difficult question, but it's also a question of, sometimes I think that there are different values in the Torah. And the fact that one thing is a value doesn't mean that it can't clash with other values. Sometimes there's a clash and tension and kind of a clash between different values. And the fact that one thing is a value doesn't mean that there aren't other values that should be taken into account. And let's try and see if that's relevant over here. So the Rambam says in Moed Nevuchim, that's source number 8 in the Guide of the Perplexed, Rambam Maimonides, we're back to Maimonides, says that it's very important that people, and this is going to be very challenging, he says that people, it's very important that people look up to the temple, to Beit HaMikdash. They have to look at it, they have to be in awe of Beit HaMikdash. They have to look up to it and show it great respect. So the Kohanim in the Mikdash, they wear certain clothing, they have uniforms, and part of the purpose of uniforms is to make the Mikdash very respected and very, considered highly by the people, and that's very important. And because, says the Rambam over here in this sentence that I'm kind of illuminating right now, that by the masses, a person who does not look nice, does not look like a good-looking person, who looks like, the perfect physical form of a person, if the people working in the Mikdash will not have that perfect form, that will hurt, that will damage this purpose of people respecting Beit HaMikdash. Then he goes on and he says about a Levi, a Levite, not a Kohen. A Levite, one of the roles of the Leviim in Beit HaMikdash over here was to sing. Now, if a person doesn't sing well, if he's a Levi and he doesn't sing well, he can't be one of the singers in Beit HaMikdash. If he doesn't know how to play music, I'm not going to give him a violin or a harp and ask him to play it, because the purpose of having this singing and music in the Mikdash is to be something which is spiritually elevating. And Hazel can give us a lecture about that. But if he doesn't do it well, or if he doesn't sing well or play music well, then he can't perform that role. But if he has a physical disfiguration, that doesn't make him not, he can be a Levi, that's okay. So that shows us the problem, because not singing well or not playing music well is relevant to the role of Leviim who sing or play music in the Mikdash. Obviously, if he doesn't do it well, he can't be one of the people doing it. I understand that. But being disfigured or having a physical ailment is not relevant. Therefore, for the Leviim, it doesn't disqualify them to be Leviim in the Mikdash. But for the Kohanim, it does, because, says the Rambam, then the masses will not have respect for Beit HaMikdash. So I taught this to young students not long ago. And one of the young ladies I was teaching said, well, when the masses don't understand, when the masses have a distorted idea of who should work in the Mikdash, we shouldn't give in to them. We should educate them. And this is a serious question. And let's take it to today. Let's take it to today. If you have two people running for office, right? There are elections, and there are two people running for office. Are people who are physically fit, who have, they look nice, they're big, strong, good-looking people. They're all, perfectly physically built. We do not have any workers with physical. I'm sorry. I'm losing my electricity. We're going to have to end this. Sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. We're going to have to stop here.
Before Shlamati your mom. Before Shlamati your mom. Be well. Thank you for the
See you next time. I apologize. I don't have enough battery.
Oh, sorry.
Well done all around.
Next time, an extra half hour.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, be well. Have a good night.
Regards to Malka.
Yeah.
And have a good night.
Thank you.
Oh, that's a shame. You prepared.